Good day everyone, I am Cassandra Isabel M. Sevilla. In this presentation, we the group 4 will going to tackle about research strategies, planning your own investigatory methodologies. So at the end of this lesson, you can design a strategy or sequence of steps that addresses the scientific question at hand. Next is set up the scope and limitation of the research, organize data gathering strategies, present a written research methodology, and prepare a scientifically sound research proposal. So I am going to first introduce to you about the study design, choosing the appropriate research methodology. In an experimental study design, researchers introduce an intervention or treatment to a group of participants known as the sample data. So the purpose of this intervention is to examine its effects on the participants. So the intervention is called the independent variable because it can be controlled or manipulated by the researchers. So they carefully consider and decide what intervention to apply in the study. And the changes that the researchers expect to observe or measure as a result of the intervention are referred to as the dependent variable. So the dependent variable is an outcome or response that is believed to be influenced by the independent variable. So by comparing the values or measurements of the dependent variable before and after the intervention, researchers can assess the impact of effectiveness of the intervention on the participants. So researchers often carry out experiments under controlled conditions and in a natural environment. In experiments under controlled conditions, researchers design and set up experiments in a controlled environment. They carefully plan the experiment, manipulate variables, introduce interventions, and investigate the effects. So the purpose is to isolate and control various factors to observe the specific impact of the intervention. On the other hand, experiments in a natural environment involve applying the intervention to samples within their own natural environment. This means that the experiment takes place in a real-world setting, such as community or a specific population. So the researchers observe and measure the effects of the intervention as it naturally occurs without manipulating the environment or controlling external factors as strictly as in controlled conditions. So both types of experiments have their advantages and are suited for different research goals. Controlled experiments allow the researchers to establish causal relationships by eliminating confounding variables, while experiments in a natural environment provide insights into how interventions work in real-life contexts. So, experimental study designs can be any of the following. First, one that employs a control group. So this refers to a study design where participants are divided into two or more groups. One group receives the intervention or treatment being studied, while the other group, called the control group, does not receive the intervention. So by comparing the outcomes between the two groups, researchers can assess the effectiveness of the intervention. So the second one is one that is comparative. So this type of study design involves comparing different groups or conditions to understand the differences and similarities between them. It may involve comparing interventions, treatments, or groups with varying characteristics or exposures. So the goal is to identify the impact of these differences on the outcomes being studied. So the third one is one that employs placebo. In some studies, a placebo is used as a control. A placebo is an inactive substance or treatment that has no therapeutic effect. So participants in the control group receive the placebo, while the experimental group receives the actual intervention. This helps the researchers determine whether the observed effects are due to the intervention itself or to the other factors like the placebo effect. The fourth one is the one that maps out trends. This type of study aims to identify patterns or trends in data over time. Researchers collect data at multiple points or intervals and analyze it to understand how variables change or evolve over the course of the study. It provides insights into long-term patterns and helps identify potential relationships or associations. The fifth one is the one that considers the impact only. In this type of study design, researchers focus solely on evaluating the impact or effect of a particular intervention, treatment, or factor interest. So they assess the outcome or outcomes of interest without considering other potential influencing factors, aiming to isolate and measure the specific impact of the intervention. So the sixth one is that one that typically compares conditions before and after the integration of the intervention. So this type of study, often called a before and after study or pre-post study, involves collecting data from participants or groups both before and after the implementation of an intervention. By comparing the outcomes or measures before and after the intervention, researchers can assess the effectiveness or impact of the intervention. So these different study designs provide researchers with various tools and approaches to investigate the effects, impacts, and trends associated with interventions, treatments, or other factors of interest. And that is all for my part. Thank you.
Good day everyone, I am Jake from Buletic and I am the next reporter. So the experimental study design employs a control group in addition to the sample group. The control group serves as the baseline where the researchers may compare results to. Both sample and control groups are subjected to testing, which is the measurement of the dependent variable as influenced by the intervention. Now, the change in the dependent as observed in each group, the control and sample group, is to obtain quantitatively by determining the difference between measurements done before the intervention and measurements done after the intervention. Here are the general formula for measuring variables. First is the change in dependent variable in control group is equals to measurements after intervention to measurements before intervention. Change in dependent variable in sample group is equals to measurements after intervention and measurements before intervention. And lastly, effect of intervention is equals to change in dependent variable in sample group is equals to change in dependent variable in control group. Now, molecularly imprinted polymer or MIP-based sensor is prepared by incorporating a chemical compound which becomes the target for detection of the sensor during the fabrication of the sensor by polymerization. Now, the MIP has a predefined selectivity for a certain analyte or group of structurally similar chemicals. Therefore, this is the best material to utilize in a separation procedure. Non-imprinted polymer or NIP sensor. In the preparation of the NIP sensor, no chemical compound or target for detection is contained in the formulation. In other words, no chemical compound is included in the formulation. Now, both NIP and MIP sensors are exposed to real samples containing arbitrarily 10 units concentration and without or 0 unit concentration, the chemical compound to test their respective abilities of detection and measure the response of each sensor, meaning both sensors are exposed due down to real samples, one with arbitrarily 10 units concentration and one with none, to test the abilities of each sensor and measure the response afterwards. And after the measuring of responses at each sensor, the responses are then quantitatively assessed to determine the efficiency of detection of the chemical compound using the MIP-based sensor as test sensor and the NIP-based sensor as the control sensor. That is all for my part. Thank you for listening. The next topic will be discussed by Miss Jasmine Bodiongan and Mr. George Luna.
Good day, everyone. I am Jasmine Shane Bodiongan, and I will be discussing the research designs to adopt. Comparative design. An experimental design can adopt a comparative design. In this type of research, several individual samples may be taken from testing, and then each individual sample receives each kind of intervention. Observations achieved for each sample are compared to determine if there has been a change in the dependent variables being tested. Basically, when you do comparative research, you compare two groups and then you formulate a conclusion about them. For example, you may employ different mineral acids to extract nickel from nickel laterite ores. Three known masses of nickel laterite ore from the same batch will be subjected to hydrochloric acid, nitric acid, and sulfuric acid treatments in the same concentration. The percentage of nickel extracted is determined in each treatment, after which a comparison is made to determine which acid is best suited to extract nickel from nickel laterite ores. Next, placebo effect. The placebo effect is referred to as the patient's faith or belief that the treatment he or she is receiving can cure him or her of disease even if the new drug is ineffective. The use of placebo in experimental design is typically observed during the clinical trials of a newly developed drug. An experimental group subjected to placebo effect testing appears to receive the new drug. However, it is unknown to the subject that the new prescribed drug contains no active ingredient, thus rendering ineffective. In this experimental design, there can be three groups that could be employed for testing: the experimental group, the control group, and the placebo group. The experimental group is actually the one receiving the newly developed drug. The control group can be the patient receiving a known drug commercially available to the same disease. Scientific inquiry. A scientific inquiry can be designed in such a way that the observations collected can be used to generate a pattern or a trend. An example of this type of experimental design can be seen in experiments used to assess the gravity of global warming. Here, historical data pertaining to the level of carbon dioxide collected over a certain period of time and the sets of data that are currently obtained are evaluated to make inferences or to extrapolate trends. Analysis of past data allowed the calculation of what contributed to the formation of holes in the ozone layer, what is currently happening in the ozone layer, and how the phenomenon is currently being mitigated. Earlier findings will also help predict future possibilities, such as whether this phenomenon will continue to go on or not, if the ozone layer is still deteriorating, and what the current pH levels of seas and oceans are, among others, as caused by the levels of carbon dioxide. Scientific inquiry will be further discussed by Christian George Luna. Thank you.
The Philippine government, through the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, or DENR, for instance, is requiring industrial or business firms to secure an Environment Compliance Certificate, or ECC, as one of the requirements before the firms will operate in the country. Further, the DENR requires that these firms submit an Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS. The EIS describes the potential impact of the firm and its activities to the immediate environment and community should its operation commences. The study, in other words, is mainly focused on determining the effects of the intervention when the firm is already fully operational, the foreseen impacts, and some measures to be taken to mitigate or to eliminate those impacts. Here, the data will be collected prior to the operations of the firm and will be compared to existing information, data acquired before the assessment, during, pre-testing or from secondary sources of information, regardless of the information described in the EIS. This document will serve as a source of baseline information and will be used for monitoring purposes when the firm is already operating. Some experimental designs are intended to characterize what transpires before the application of the intervention, as well as to assess how a phenomenon or common belief changes when the intervention is incorporated. Next, we will tackle data collection. Data collection can be obtained through experimentation and observation. Experimentation involves doing work under controlled conditions, such as those that are performed in the laboratory or in a pilot plant, while observation is a systematic and scientific way of recording what you have witnessed when an experiment commences. Observations usually accompanies experimentation. Video recordings are usually employed to keep track of the highlights of the experimentation process. A well-kept laboratory notebook, design notebook, and other record-keeping materials must be maintained, especially if you intend to apply for a patent. The data of your research are substantial for its success, so data should be managed properly. In addition, the whole data collection process would normally cost you money and time, and you may have to put limits as to available funds devoted for it.
Good day, I am Gaiden Dionio and I am going to talk about precision and accuracy. Accuracy pertains to the closeness of the results to the true value. The true value may come from certified or standard reference materials in which composition has been duly certified. Uncertainties associated with each measurement must be established and reported. Quantification of experimental error and/or deviation would also be useful and relevant during the processing of data. Precision. Precision refers to the closeness of experimental data with one another. Highly precise data will validate your study. The relative standard deviation, or RSD, is the quantitative measure of the precision of data. The RSD is calculated from the measured values obtained from several trials or replicates. Reproducibility and repeatability. Reproducibility demonstrates conformance of your results with those results obtained by other researchers, thus signifying the objectivity of your study. When you can reproduce the same results as other researchers, it shows that your study is objective and reliable. While repeatability pertains to the consistency of the results obtained from replicate runs performed by the same researchers using the same set of equipment. Repeatable data impress reliability. In other words, repeatability means getting similar results when you do the same experiment multiple times. It shows that your data is reliable and can be trusted. To facilitate the data collection process, you must itemize your objectives so that you will be able to work out the information necessary to fulfill them. This task further helps you identify both independent and dependent variables to be tested via experimentation. Formulated research questions will also be useful in determining the suitable experimental design. So to make it easier to collect data, you'll need to make a list of your goals. This will help you figure out what information you need. It also helps you figure out what things are related to each other and what things are not. Having a list of questions will also help you plan your experiment better. A table similar to the table 4.1 may be prepared to systematize the preparation of an experimental design. A specific objective, output, outcome, source of data, method of data collection, and variable to be tested.
Good day, I am Alea Nova L. Estrada and my topic is sampling. Sampling means selecting the group that you will actually collect data from your research. For example, if you are researching the opinions of students in your university, you could survey a sample of 100 students. In statistics, sampling allows you to test a hypothesis about the characteristics of a population. A STEM-based study would generally require data collection from samples constituting the experimental group. Samples are a representative of the whole population from which they were obtained. They must be obtained in a reliable manner, free from the prejudice of the researcher, and maintained in suitable conditions that preserve their characteristics or the properties prior to collection until they reach the laboratory for analysis. The sample size to be taken is determined statistically. The researcher usually sets out the tolerable error for the study. However, when the study anticipates the use of the data for impact assessments, predicting trends and development of policies, among others, a large sample size would be acceptable. But to handle a large sample size, you will need a huge amount of money. A useful equation by Oskog 2004 for determining the sample size with an acceptable error can be adopted. The equation dictates that the confidence interval for reporting the mean or average results is known with the predetermined RSD. The confidence interval is the range of value at which the mean or the average lies as follows, where n is the number of samples, t is the test value taken from the student's t-test table, y bar is the mean, s sub s is the standard deviation, and sigma r is the relative standard deviation or uncertainty. Calculations involving the equation here is done repeatedly until such time that the iterations converge at one value of n. So here are the numbers of considerations that will facilitate the preparation of a sampling plan. Set up logistics, ways and means plans, sampling method to be employed, availability of specialized sampling equipment, sample containers needed, number of samples to be taken, number of trials to be performed, types of analysis or testings to be conducted, bulk of samples required for analysis or testing, preservation of samples, storage of samples if analysis or testing cannot be performed immediately.
Good day, everyone. I'm Jordan Wallace Totto, and I'm going to report about sampling methods. Sampling methods may be classified as random, stratified, or systematic. Random sampling assumes that for a given sampling area, that are equal chances that each lot may be taken as a sample. And for the systematic sampling refers to gathering samples over a sampling area in predefined manner. And, for example, field sampling has to be conducted to assess the water quality of Pasig River, which is a 27-kilometer stretch of water. Systematic sampling can be employed starting at either ends of the river near Manila Bay or near Laguna de Bay, and in which water samples can be obtained every 1.5 kilometers. sampling methods, stratified sampling is a sampling technique in which the targets of measurements or analysis are equally distributed over a sampling area. And um, uh, for considering again the collection of water samples along the whole stretch of Pasig River with stratified sampling, samples could be taken at varying depths at each sampling site. Um, for instance, starting at Manila Bay, subsampling will be executed collecting samples to vertical transects with varying depth. And examples are sampling at the bottom of the river and the other at the mid transect of the river. Uh, for the next is the batch sampling is an example of sampling in which samples may be taken by batch employing random, stratified, or systematic sampling methods. This type of sampling is bound by time. The examples of time hourly, daily, and monthly. And frequency examples are once a day and twice a year. And other considerations such as varying tides, high or low, and varying seasons. And in the case of some samples collection in the Philippines, dry and wet seasons. And that's all for my part, and thank you.
Good day, everyone. My name is Angelo B. Credo, and I'm here to present the ethics in data collection. So, different professions may observe varying codes of ethics. Nonetheless, having a code ethics is important, as it serves as a guide in conducting a research in a professional manner. Ethics is very important, obviously, in research because it allows you to implement safe for the respondents and for any substances whatsoever, because morality, all that. So, for example, I'm gonna give an example about how ethics plays a role in research. So in December 2015, the Supreme Court of the Philippines has stopped the conduct of field testing trials in genetically engineered crops, such as uh, some genetically engineered talong, which stem from the case filed by groups Greenpeace, which is an environmentalist group, and Masipag, a coalition of farmers. The court appeals decision states that there is no full scientific certainty yet as to the effects of the long field trial to the environment, to the health of the people. The SC uphold this decision, saying the lack of scientific certainty is no reason for an inaction at the risk of potentially serious or irreversible harm to the environment. So, as described by the United States federal policy, plagiarism is the appropriations of another person's ideas, process, results, or words without giving appropriate credit, of course. Fabrication is an act of composing data or results and recording or reporting them. Now, falsification is an act of manipulating materials, equipment, or processes or changing and omitting data results such that the research is not accurately represented in the research record. Ethics also dictate that experiments to be implemented are safe, including the observance of safe handling disposal of test subjects such as animals and toxic chemicals or reagents, reagents used. The researchers must uphold integrity in using research funds at all times. Researchers must not commit misappropriations in the misuse of research funds.
Writing a strong research proposal. When writing a strong research proposal, it is crucial for effectively conveying your research idea and securing funding or approval for your project. First, when we are when you are conducting a research we need to first you need to understand what your purpose. So to begin by understanding the purpose and requirements of the research proposal. So kung imong purpose ba kay for funding application, academic institution, or for another organization. So dapat clear mong mind about your purpose kung unsay ganahan nimo na studyhan. So the second is to literature review. It provides a comprehensive review of relevant literature to demonstrate your familiarity with the existing research and theories related to your topic. So when you're conducting your research and na naka-title, so mas nindot kung magbasa ka daan og mga related literature or studies para mas relevant and mas interesting imong research. Imong study, I mean. So, a strong research proposal must have a firm theoretical and conceptual framework. So, it is obviously true because it contextualizes the research. The theoretical and conceptual frameworks provide the context and background of your research. It helps to situate your study within existing theories, concepts, and showcasing the relevance and significance of your study. A research proposal describes what you want to pursue and why you have to do the study you are proposing. So as I've said earlier, that we need to understand our purpose kung nganong katotong gistudyhan. So, a research proposal sets out information of what you have planned to do over a specific period of time and how you are going to accomplish it. So, sa sugod pa lang, na nakaigamay ang idea kung kung unsang kung pila ang duration or kung kanusa ka mahuman dapat. So it is written in a document which can be subjected to scrutiny. Subjected to scrutiny, which means dapat na critical observation sa imong paper para mas more relevant and interesting imong study. Mag-undergo pa siya scrutiny. So to assess the feasibility of the study to be undertaken and to evaluate the appropriateness and suitability of the methodologies chosen. This also serves as a basis for research supervisors or funding institutions in coming up with a decision whether to financially support the study or not. So even though nanakay nindot nga study, ilagya po nang i-undergo sa scrutiny para mas masabtan pag ayo kung asa yun about imong study. So a research proposal outlines what you want to pursue and how will be achieved. In research proposal, it provides a roadmap for your study, guiding both the researcher and readers through the proposed research project. So in research proposal, it is true that it provides a roadmap para mas organized imong thoughts or imong idea kung paunsa nimo siya ipasabot sa imong readers pod og para dali pod masabtan. The research proposal typically contains the following components: the introduction, significance of the study, objectives of the study, scope and limitations of the study, review of related literatures, and the methodology. So the first is the introduction. Introduction introduces the research problem by providing an overview of what has been done, leading to the current situation, and what is still missing to the solution that will address the problem considered. So, in introduction, it is designed to capture the reader's interest, establish the relevance of the research topic, and introduce the key elements of the proposal. So, susugod pa lang dapat ang imong pag-introduce sa imong study is eye-catching or eye-catcher and interesting sa sa readers, sa atong readers, sa imong audience. So the second one is the significance of the study. Provides reasons the study should be carried out. You also have to assert the major outcome or impact of the study. This section should this be pursued. You may highlight the potential stakeholders who will greatly benefit from the results of your study. So it highlights the potential impact, contributions, and benefits that the study may have within the field of research, as well as its broader implications. So, sa significance of the study, it may fill in the gap which no other researchers tend to study a certain topic. So, for example, sa amuang research, other researchers focuses on the self-efficacy and organizational commitment sa mga workers. So kami as a student, and some of us are student leader, so among study is to know the self-efficacy of a student leaders. So since wala may nag-study or wala kayo study about student leaders, so kami ang nag-fill in ana nga gap, and interested po mi kung unsa ang ilang kung unsay self-efficacy sa student leaders. So the third one is the objective of the study. The objective of the study that will satisfy the research questions you are formulated for your study are discussed here. So diri nga part matubag ang mga questions sa mga readers kung unsay jud imong purpose or unsa jud imong objective or unsay imong ipasabot sila about sa imong study. So this includes specific information that you would like to achieve or pursuit of the research. So these objectives provide a clear direction and purpose of purpose for the study, guiding the research design, data collection, and analysis. So when formulating the objectives of your research study, take time to reflect on the specific aims and outcomes that you want to achieve. Ensure that your objectives are clear, measurable, feasible, and aligned with your research questions or hypotheses. By setting well-defined objectives, you provide a roadmap for your research and enable evaluators or readers to understand the purpose and expected outcomes of your study. That's all for my part. The next reporter will explain further information. Thank you.
So the next is scope and limitation of the study. Lays down things as projected from the study, which of course are all fixed on accomplished stated objectives. The limitation of the study generally describes some of the probable operation problems that may be encountered in the progress. Or, in other words, the scope and limitation are the boundaries of your studies, or the limit on how you are going to do the study. Next is a review of related literature. The literature review gives the theoretical background for the study. This literature survey strengthens your research proposal in the sense na feasible ba siya during the times ng study, makaya ba ninyo, o ma-demonstrate siya kung saan mo siya pagbuhat sa study. Next is a methodology. Provides a detailed description of the steps or procedure to be executed in your quest to address the research problem. In other words, are the steps or the methods in your study, like usa-usa na pag-steps kung saan mo siya pagbuhat sa iyong study. A research proposal includes all the information leading to accomplishment of the research objectives. It checks out if the research proposal is within contribution in the study. So, methodology includes the following: material, reagents, experimental setup, design, etc. to be used. Sampling design that describes a specific study area, location where pilot testing or field survey will be conducted, or etc. Analytic tests to be conducted, etc. Analytic tools and software to process your data, procurement of the necessary license, trainings on the use of these kinds of software, and others. Ethical concern to consider in the conduct of the study. Document the written permit clearance and other relevant information from government institutions. Reference. It's exhaustive list of bibliographic details that has been relevant that used to the formulation of the research proposal. Reference consists of resources of information ranging from journal articles, technical magazine or gazettes, books, thesis, and other form of publication. Reference is the link or the where you get all your information is makabutang siya sa reference, please.
So next is appendix. So appendix. This includes some calculations and estimations to name a few in support of the planned experimental setup, design, process, or technology to be adopted. So mo na siya ang appendix. Next is the Gantt chart or timetable. So this chart or timetable provides the duration within which the research activities will be put into action until completion of the study. So take note nga, mo ni ang Gantt chart, mag-provide sa duration sa mong research activities sa pinakasinugdanan hangtod sa ano sa siya mahuman. And each research activity is directly linked to the specific objective and it intends to satisfy. Also, the length of time to complete the task is indicated in the Gantt chart. And lastly, kay ang proposed budget for the study. So, every research undertaking needs funds. So, of course, di ba? Di man ka makahimo og research og wala mo kwarta. And the estimated budget is assumed to be sufficient to cover all anticipated expenses until such time that the findings of the study are reported and published. And for example, checklist of items that need to be included in the budget, we may go to this site. And that's all for my topic. Thank you.
So here are the essential learning in doing your capstone research. To sum up all the discussions, first, the validity of your research study must be tested and confirmed through repeated measurements. And in doing these measurements, data are generated. Data are an integral part of STEM-based research. Hence, the data collection process is an important research activity. Its conduct should be done in a highly credible manner. There are several methodological designs that, when executed conscientiously, would provide useful and relevant data for your study. And your data must be acceptable and are producible, repeatable, and accurate and precise. Data collection methods involves the conduct of sampling, which samples are representative of a particular populations. So, a STEM-based research requires different modes of sampling. Moreover, the number of samples to be taken can be calculated based on as known confidence level of the true mean. It is critical to any sampling endeavor that the samples to be taken must be cautiously preserved such that its properties are maintained until the completion of the experiment. So each type of STEM-based research requires different modes of sampling. Moreover, the number of samples to be taken can be calculated based on a known confidence level of the true mean. It is critical to any sample endeavor that the samples to be taken must be cautiously preserved such that its properties are maintained until the completion of the experiment. In addition, ethics must be strictly adhered to during the data collection process. You are strongly instructed not to commit plagiarism, fabrication, and falsification of data, among other research misconducts and misbehaviors. The whole research process is a decent and important undertaking. Its credibility and integrity must not in a way to be tainted with doubts and uncertainties. The proposal describes the objectives of the study and details the plan of an action to be implemented for data collection, which will therefore achieve the objectives of the study. And lastly, for our essential learning about doing capstone research, we all know that the research proposal has the following contents: the introduction, methodology, expected results, references, timetable, and budget proposal. So the proposal must be able to demonstrate two things to potential funding institution. First is that focus frame of mind. The second is that you are knowledgeable, skilled to undertake a scientific study, and therefore eligible to receive financial support.